A local militia thought they were scaring an outsider off his land. They burned his house and chained him up. They didn't know their victim was a retired Delta Force sergeant major. The education was about to begin. The gravel crunched under the tires of Elias Thorne's pickup truck, a satisfying sound that signaled the end of a long journey and the beginning of something new. At 55, with a career in the U.S. Army's most elite unit behind him, Elias was looking for one thing: quiet. The 47 acres of rolling Georgia hills, crowned by a two-story farmhouse, seemed to promise exactly that. The white paint was weathered but solid, and a wraparound porch faced the morning sun, overlooking a line of ancient oak trees. "This will do just fine," he murmured, the words tasting of relief. 20 years as a command sergeant major in Delta Force had taught him to appreciate simplicity. 4 walls, a roof, and enough space to breathe without the constant pressure of command. The drive from Fort Bragg had been a blur of identical small towns, but Millbrook, nestled in a curve of the Chattahoochee River, had felt different. It felt like a place a man could finally set down his ruck, both literally and figuratively. As he walked the perimeter of his new property, old habits kicked in. He noted sight lines, natural cover, and defensible positions. The nearest neighbor was half a mile down the road, close enough for an emergency, far enough for privacy. Perfect. An hour later, he drove into town for supplies. Millbrook's Main Street was a postcard from a bygone era. Murphy's Hardware, Daisy's Diner, and the First National Bank stood in a neat, proud line. American flags hung from every lamp post. When the bell above the door of Murphy's Hardware chimed, conversation inside didn't just quiet, it stopped. 3 men in work clothes turned to stare, their eyes tracking him with an unnerving, unified focus as he moved toward the tool aisle. "Help you find something?" the clerk asked, his voice a flat, neutral monotone that was somehow less welcoming than silence. "Just browse, thanks," Elias replied, his voice calm. He selected a hammer, nails, and a heavy-duty deadbolt lock. At the counter, the clerk rang up the purchase without making eye contact. "You're the fella bought the Henderson place," he stated. It wasn't a question. "That's right. Been empty 2 years. Since old Jim passed." The implication was clear: this place had a history, and he was not part of it. Behind him, whispers started, not quite quiet enough to be unheard. "Paid cash, from what I heard. City money. Wonder what he plans to do with all that land." Elias paid and left, feeling their stares follow him through the window. He chose Daisy's Diner for lunch, picking a corner booth with his back to the wall, another habit that refused to die. A woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and a warm smile, approached with a coffee pot. "Afternoon, honey. I'm Betty Hawthorne. You must be our new neighbor." Her welcome was a stark contrast to the chill at the hardware store. "Elias Thorne. A pleasure, ma'am." "Oh, listen to those manners," she beamed, pouring his coffee. "What brings you to our little corner of Georgia?" "Looking for quiet. Seemed like a good place to find it." Betty's expression flickered. A shadow of concern crossed her features. "Well, Millbrook is certainly that, most of the time." She leaned a little closer, her voice dropping. "People here, they take some time to warm up to newcomers. Don't take it personal. They're good people, mostly. Just, set in their ways." The way she emphasized their ways suggested it was a loaded term. "I appreciate the advice," Elias said, meeting her gaze. Driving home, he noticed a pickup truck following at a distance. When he turned onto his gravel driveway, the truck slowed as it passed, 2 men inside watching him intently. That evening, as he stood on his porch watching the sunset, he felt a profound sense of peace. This was his land, his home. He was unaware of the camera lens that caught the dying light from the tree line, focusing on his silhouette. The next morning, he found the first sign. A small, crudely made wooden cross, barely 2 feet tall, had been planted in his front yard. It wasn't burned, but the message was unmistakable. You are being watched. You are not welcome. Elias pulled it from the ground with a steady hand. He examined the deliberate, amateur construction. This was step one in a playbook of intimidation he'd seen used in far-flung, hostile territories. He carried the cross to his workshop, set it on a workbench, and opened his laptop. In a password-protected file, he began a new log entry. Date. Time. Description of incident. His face was grim. The quiet life, it seemed, would have to be earned. Over the next 2 weeks, the campaign of low-grade intimidation escalated with methodical precision. Elias's mailbox was knocked from its post twice, forcing him to reset it in a bag of concrete. His truck tires were slashed while he shopped for groceries at the town's only market, the act drawing a small crowd of onlookers who watched his predicament with blank, unhelpful expressions. The silent judgment was as sharp as the blade that had pierced the rubber. Then the phone calls began. They came at all hours, usually after midnight. Sometimes it was just heavy breathing. Other times, it was a disguised voice, low and menacing, filled with vitriol not against his race, but against what he represented. Federal man. Think you can just come in here, buy up our land with your government money? This is our town, city boy. We don't need your kind changing things. Elias documented every incident with the dispassionate precision of an intelligence analyst compiling a threat assessment. He didn't report them. Not yet. Reporting it to local law enforcement felt futile. Deputy Jake Morrison, a young officer with an earnest but nervous energy, drove by more frequently, his patrol car slowing as he passed the farm. He'd even stopped by once, offering a business card with his personal cell number. If anything comes up, anything at all, you call me directly, he'd said, his eyes conveying a worried apology for the town he was sworn to protect. Elias knew the deputy meant well, but he also knew the young man was out of his depth. This wasn't a problem a local deputy could solve. On a Friday afternoon, Elias needed replacement hinges for his front door. He was methodically reinforcing the entire house. He walked back into Murphy's Hardware. The same clerk was behind the counter, his demeanor even more skittish than before. As Elias headed for the door, a heavy-set man in work clothes, reeking of beer and stale tobacco, blocked his path. "You're the one bought the Henderson place," the man slurred. His name, Elias would later learn, was Tommy Briggs. "That's right," Elias said, his voice neutral. He recognized the stance, the aggressive posture of a man looking to start a fight he was sure he could win. "Been hearin' a lot about you," Tommy said, his eyes narrowed. "All good things, I hope." Tommy's laugh was a harsh, ugly sound. "Depends on your perspective. See, some folks think you made a mistake coming here. Think maybe you'd be happier somewhere with more government folks. Like DC or something. I'm plenty happy where I am. Are you now?" Tommy stepped closer, invading Elias's personal space. "Funny thing about happiness. It can disappear real quick when you ain't where you belong." The store had gone quiet. Customers feigned interest in shelves of bolts and screws, but their attention was fixed on the confrontation. "And where exactly do you think I belong, Mr. Briggs?" Elias asked, his voice dropping slightly, becoming preternaturally calm. "Not here." Tommy's voice rose, a bully gaining confidence from the silent audience. "This is a decent community. A family community. We don't need outsiders coming in, bringing their federal attitudes and changing things. What changes are you so afraid of? The kind that follows people like you." Tommy was almost shouting now. "People who think a fancy military career gives them the right to do whatever they want. This is our home. We protect what's ours." Elias took a half-step forward, closing the distance between them. The move was subtle but immediately shifted the dynamic. "I'm a retired American soldier who paid cash for my property and minds his own business. If that threatens you, then the problem isn't with me." Tommy's face darkened with rage. You think that uniform makes you better than us? I think it makes me someone who fought for the right of every American to live where they choose. Even here. Pretty words, Tommy spat, his hand twitching toward his belt, where the handle of a large knife was visible. But words don't change reality. And the reality is, you ain't welcome. The air was electric. Elias calculated angles, noted exits, assessed the threat level of every man in the store. He could end this confrontation in seconds, but this wasn't a dusty street in Mogadishu. It was Main Street, USA. He made a tactical decision to de-escalate. I appreciate you making your position clear, Elias said calmly. He stepped around Tommy. Now you know mine. I'm staying. He walked out the door, the bell chiming his exit. Tommy's hateful stare followed him all the way. We'll see about that, he muttered. Elias's jaw was tight as he drove home. Yes, he thought. We will. The assault came on a moonless night a week later. Elias was reviewing property surveys on his laptop when the low crunch of gravel in his driveway broke the rural silence. It wasn't one vehicle, it was several, their engines running low. He killed the lights in the house and moved to a front window, peering through a slit in the curtains. 6 pickup trucks were positioning themselves in a semicircle, blocking his driveway, their headlights off. Dark shapes moved between them, men carrying what looked like torches and heavy tools. They were organized, moving with a purpose that spoke of planning. They weren't just here to intimidate, they were here to lay siege. Elias grabbed his service pistol from its locked case and moved to the back of the house, intending to slip out and circle around behind them, using the terrain to his advantage. But as he reached for the kitchen door, the flicker of torchlight danced outside the back windows. They had surrounded the house completely, cutting off all escape routes. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, no way out. Time to talk. He moved back to the living room, staying low. Through the front curtains, he watched 8 men advance in a loose tactical formation, torches held high. Tommy Briggs was at the lead, his face a mask of triumphant hatred in the firelight. They spread out along the front of the house, a silent, menacing line. This wasn't a random mob. This was planned. They were using basic military tactics to control the engagement, forcing him to come to them. He considered his options. Barricade himself inside and call Deputy Morrison, a call that might bring help too little and too late. Or try to fight his way out against overwhelming odds. Before he could decide, a rock shattered the front window, glass exploding across the floor. Johnson. Tommy's voice boomed through the broken pane. Time for that conversation. More rocks shattered the side windows, the sound of breaking glass echoing through the house. They weren't trying to break in. They were unmaking his home, breaking his sanctuary, flushing him out. Come on out, federal boy. Let's settle this like men. A Molotov cocktail sailed through the broken front window, splashing liquid fire across his living room floor. The flames erupted with a hungry roar, instantly consuming an old armchair. Then another shattered in the kitchen. Smoke, thick and acrid, began to fill the house. He had seconds. Burn alive inside, or face 8 armed men outside. Kicking open the front door, Elias rolled onto the porch, weapon ready, coming up in a stable firing stance. But they were waiting. 3 men rushed him at once, swinging clubs and tire irons, while the others provided light and backup. Elias dropped one with a precise shot to the knee and wounded another in the shoulder, but a heavy tire iron connected with his wrist, the impact sending his pistol spinning into the dark yard. The fight was brutal, primal, and short. 8 against 1 was a mathematical certainty no amount of training could overcome. He fought with the ferocious efficiency of a cornered animal, breaking a nose with an elbow, dislocating a shoulder with a joint lock. He took 2 more down with him, but the sheer weight of the assault buried him. The last thing he saw before the world went black was Tommy Briggs standing over him, a bloody tire iron in his hand, his house burning brightly behind them, a funeral pyre for the quiet life he had so desperately wanted. "Welcome to Millbrook," Tommy grunted, and brought the iron down one last time. Elias drifted back to consciousness in fragments. Pain was the first anchor, a clinical inventory of injuries, broken ribs, a possible concussion, a dislocated shoulder. Dried blood crusted his lips. He was alive. The realization brought with it a flood of tactical awareness. He was in an abandoned barn. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the walls, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. He was chained to a massive central support beam, heavy shackles on his wrists. The chain was thick, rusted, but solid. He tested his restraints, the movement small and deliberate, a professional assessment of his prison. These weren't amateurs anymore. Voices carried from outside. Angry, agitated. "Should have finished it at his house," one man said. Tommy wanted him to suffer first. "Make an example," said another. The barn door creaked open. Tommy Briggs entered, dragging a terrified-looking man in a pressed polo shirt and khakis behind him. Elias recognized him as the president of the local bank, Frank Miller. "Jesus Christ, Tommy. This has gone too far," Frank whispered, staring in horror at the chained and bloodied Elias. "This is kidnapping. Federal charges. This is sending a message that needed sending 20 years ago," Tommy snapped, his face illuminated by a camping lantern. "You want to back out now? After your money bought the gasoline that burned his house? I never agreed to this." Tommy backhanded Frank across the face. "You agreed the moment you wrote the first check. You're in it now, whether you like it or not." Elias watched the banker crumble, the precise moment a man realizes he has crossed a line from which there is no return. Fear made men do things they never thought possible. "Look who's awake," Tommy said, turning his attention to Elias. He pulled a folding chair closer. "Good. I was worried we hit you too hard." "Not hard enough, apparently," Elias replied, his voice a low, steady rasp despite the pain. Tommy laughed. "Still got fight in you. I like that. Makes this more interesting. See, you came to our town thinking you could just take what you wanted. Our land. Our way of life. But everything has a price. I paid the asking price. Money ain't the only currency that matters." Tommy leaned forward. "Some things got to be earned. Respect. Belonging." Elias subtly tested the chains again, checking the connection point at the beam behind him. The shackles were modern and heavy-duty, but they were attached to an old, rusted eye-bolt screwed into the ancient oak beam. The wood around the bolt was dark, possibly rotten. Decades of moisture had likely weakened the threads. That was the weak point. "So what's the lesson?" Elias asked, buying time, keeping them talking. "Simple. You sign over the deed to your property," he gestured to Frank, who was fumbling with a briefcase, "and you leave Millbrook tonight. Never come back. We give you a 10-minute head start before we report a home invasion gone wrong. Real tragedy. And if I don't?" Then, Tommy's smile was predatory. "Accidents happen. Especially to outsiders who don't know the local hazards." As Frank shakily produced the legal documents, Marcus made his move. 20 years of escape and evasion training had taught him that restraints were only as strong as their weakest component. While they talked, he had been using micro-movements, tensing and relaxing, shifting his weight, to rock the old eye-bolt in its setting, stressing the rotten wood and weakened metal threads. When Tommy turned to supervise Frank, Elias threw his entire body weight backwards, then violently forward against the chain. The eye-bolt tore free from the beam with a sharp, splintering crack. Elias stumbled forward, 6 feet of heavy chain still shackled to his wrists. "He's loose," one of the other men shouted from the doorway. Elias didn't hesitate. He swung the length of chain like a medieval flail, the heavy metal catching a man named Carl Dixon across the chest, dropping him instantly. Tommy lunged with his knife, but Elias, a whirlwind of trained violence, trapped his arm, drove a knee into his solar plexus, and sent him doubling over, gasping for air. Frank screamed and ran for the door, but another man was already there, raising a shotgun. Nobody moves. Elias froze, the chain held ready. 4 against 1. Better odds. Drop the chain, the man ordered, his voice shaking. Sure, Elias said, a cold, dangerous smile touching his lips. But you should know something first. I'm not some random person you can intimidate. I'm a Delta Force operator. And now, I know who you are, where you live, and what you're capable of. The barn went silent. The man's finger tightened on the trigger, but that split second of hesitation cost him everything. Elias was already moving, using Tommy as a human shield as the shotgun blast went wide, tearing chunks from the barn wall. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his chain-wrapped fist connecting with the shotgunner's temple. When it was over, 4 men lay unconscious on the dirt floor. Elias stood alone in the moonlight, still wearing shackles, but no longer a prisoner. He picked up Frank's briefcase, took the shotgun, and walked out into the cool night air. The hunt had just been reversed. Elias didn't run. He melted into the landscape he had spent weeks studying. Using tools from the barn's workshop, he freed himself from the shackles by dawn. His first priority was not revenge, but justice. He found a secure, hidden location, an abandoned hunting cabin he'd marked on his surveys, and opened Frank Miller's briefcase. It was a treasure trove. Bank statements, property deeds, and a membership roster for something called the Millbrook Heritage Society. It contained names, addresses, and financial records, detailing a coordinated network of local extremists funded by Frank's illicit bank transfers. It was a complete intelligence file on the entire conspiracy. Elias spent the next 24 hours in a state of focused, disciplined activity. He photographed every document, uploading the files to an encrypted cloud server. He then took the briefcase and its contents, sealed them in a waterproof bag, and drove to a neighboring county. From a payphone at a deserted truck stop, he made a single call. The call was to a number he knew by heart, a secure line to a former brother-in-arms, now a high-ranking official in the FBI's domestic terrorism unit. "It's Thorne," Elias said, his voice calm and level. "I have a situation." He didn't give details over the phone. He simply gave his old friend a set of GPS coordinates for a drop point inside a state park and a time. "You'll find a package there. It contains everything you need to dismantle a multi-state domestic terror network based out of Millbrook, Georgia. Names, financials, everything. The target package is complete." "Elias, are you okay?" "What happened?" his friend asked, his voice sharp with concern. "I handled the immediate threat. Now I'm giving you the tools to handle the disease," Elias replied, and hung up. He trusted the system, not because it was perfect, but because he knew good people were in it. His part in the fight was over, theirs was just beginning. He drove back towards Millbrook but didn't enter the town. He parked on a high ridge overlooking the valley and waited. Just after dawn, 2 days later, he saw them. A convoy of black SUVs and unmarked sedans streamed into the town from the main highway. The FBI had arrived. The news spread through the town like wildfire. Federal agents, armed with warrants based on the undeniable evidence from Frank's briefcase, descended on the homes and businesses of Tommy Briggs, Frank Miller, and a dozen other members of the Heritage Society. They were arrested in their homes, at their jobs, in front of the same neighbors they had once intimidated. The town watched in stunned silence as the quiet, festering evil in their midst was dragged out into the harsh light of day. Betty Hawthorne called him later that afternoon, her voice a mixture of shock and elation. "Elias, you should see this. It's like the whole town is getting a chemical peel. They arrested Tommy, the bank president, half the town council. They're saying it's part of some huge conspiracy. Did you have something to do with this?" "I just made a phone call," Betty," Elias said, watching the federal vehicles move with professional efficiency below. "I pointed them in the right direction. They did the rest." The story of what happened at the farmhouse never came out. To the world, Elias Thorne was simply the victim of a home invasion who had managed to escape. But the evidence he provided was absolute. It painted a picture not of a simple hate crime, but of a sophisticated, well-funded extremist network. Weeks later, Elias stood on the rebuilt porch of his farmhouse. The scent of fresh lumber replaced the memory of smoke. The project had brought a different kind of person out from the town: neighbors, church groups, even a shame-faced Deputy Morrison, who spent 3 straight weekends helping him rebuild, a silent apology in every swing of his hammer. The community had been forced to look at itself, to confront the darkness it had allowed to grow in its shadows. The arrests were a cleansing fire, and in the aftermath, something new and better began to take root. Elias looked out at his land, the setting sun casting long shadows from the ancient oak trees. The quiet he had come here for was finally real, earned not by avoiding conflict, but by facing it with the unshakable conviction that this, too, was his country. This, too, was his home. And he wasn't leaving. Justice had been served, not by a vigilante's hand, but by the steady, systematic application of the law he had sworn his life to defend. The fireflies his nephew had caught earlier blinked in their jar on the porch rail, and Marcus quietly opened the lid, watching them drift away into the darkness to rejoin their families. Some things belonged outside in the light where everyone could see them. And some old lies finally died when exposed to the truth. This story reminds us that true strength isn't found in the fury of a mob, but in the quiet resolve of a single individual. Elias Thorne possessed the skills to meet violence with overwhelming violence, to become the monster his enemies were. Instead, he chose a harder, more honorable path. He chose justice over revenge, demonstrating that the most effective weapon against organized hate isn't a fist, but the unwavering light of the law. His courage didn't just save himself, it forced a community to confront the darkness it had ignored and empowered good people to reclaim their town. It teaches us that our truest battles are not fought against others, but for the principles we refuse to surrender. What did you find most powerful about Elias's choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of resilience and honor inspired you, please like this video, subscribe for more stories that matter, and share it with someone who believes in standing firm for what is right. And comment "Justice" to show your support.